Thank you very much, Desiree. And good afternoon. I do have the privilege of being the president of this college, Alan Ray. I have the honor of welcoming you to the annual William R. Johnson Intercultural Lecture. In 1972, William R. Johnson, Elmhurst College, class of 1968, became the first openly gay person in modern history to gain ordination to the mainstream Christian ministry. The Vice President of the Council for Health and Human Ministries of the United Church of Christ, he's worked tirelessly for 4 decades on behalf of the rights and dignity of all people, and in particular of LGBTQ people of faith and their loved ones. Elmhurst College is proud to continue his tradition of engagement with these issues with the William R. Johnson Intercultural Lecture, and honored to have Reverend Bill Johnson with us today. To begin our presentation this afternoon, please welcome Elaine Fetko-Page, Faculty Moderator of Equal.
It is my privilege to introduce to all of you Dr. Eliza Byard. She is the Executive Director of GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, an organization known worldwide as an innovative leader in the education, youth development, and civil rights sectors, fighting to end bias-based bullying, violence, and discrimination in K-12 schools, and promote a culture of respect for all. Established in 1990, GLSEN envisions a world in which every child learns to respect and accept all people, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity or expression. GLSEN seeks to develop school climates where difference is valued for the positive contribution it makes to creating a more vibrant and diverse community. Prior to officially joining GLSEN in 2001, Dr. Byard worked with GLSEN to co-produce the award-winning documentary Out of the Past, which follows the story of Kelly Peterson, who in 1995 started a gay and straight alliance club at her Salt Lake City High School. The story of her ensuing battle with school authorities is interspersed with looks back at the lives of several LGBT figures in history, including contemporary figures such as Bayard Rustin, who organized the 1963 March on Washington. Recently, Dr. Byard was invited to deliver a speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the Let Freedom Ring commemoration and call to action, the 50th anniversary of that March on Washington on August 28th. In her remarks, she reflected on Bayard Rustin and his struggles, and reflected on the struggles that continue for LGBT youth today. She closed her remarks with the following: "Across this nation, voices are ready to rise for opportunity and justice and freedom for every young person, regardless of who they are, what they look like, or who they love. Listen for those voices. Lift them up so they can be heard. When we do that, we shall all rise." I'm so excited to be here to invite you to come up. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Eliza Byard, who will talk to us about the LGBT student and the culture of respect.
I think I had a reasonable speech. Thank you very much for revisiting it. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be here with you all and to be at Elmhurst College. In getting this invitation, I had the opportunity to begin to learn more about this remarkable community. And with the welcome that I have had here today and the chance to sit with President Ray and with the namesake of this lecture, an honor I did not expect, I have only become more and more impressed with the culture of inquiry, and I particularly enjoy the poster because I saw somewhere back there, "Be the student who raises your hand," and I will remember that from the poster that I will take with me as a souvenir of this experience. So many thanks for the opportunity to be with you today. On August 28th, I stood at the side of the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. in a small chute leading out to a stage with a podium, knowing that there were about 50,000 people and most members of President Obama's cabinet waiting at the end of that chute. There were 5 people in front of me and a band right here waiting to play anyone off who went over their allotted 2 minutes on that stage. As I address you this afternoon, I want to talk to you a little bit about a journey that I have been on for some time, a journey to promote the culture of respect, a journey that most recently took me to the side of that stage, and we will end with a few of those moments here today. A day that I fondly remember as containing the 2 most frightening minutes of my entire life. I can't wait to share that with you. And thank you so much for that very generous introduction. I've lost where she has gone. There you are. Hello. Giving you all a sense of who GLSEN is and what we do. Let me ask this. How many people here participated in or were aware of the Day of Silence in high school? Okay. How many of you attended a high school that had a Gay Straight Alliance student club? Wow. Or how many of you have been faculty in a high school and used a GLSEN lesson plan? Okay. Wow. Well, I think in this audience, perhaps you have a sense of the work that GLSEN has been doing for the last 20 years. What I want to talk about today, in considering the LGBT student and the culture of respect, is talk about not so much the specifics of what GLSEN does, but this very important journey that we are on to promote a culture of respect and move our society from a place of common ground around a principle of respect that we all stand for to a common cause, an idea of a culture of respect for which we're all willing to fight and struggle and engage. That, to me, is this critical journey that we're on. Culture is, in fact, as a wonderful mentor once said to me, a journey, not a destination. And I think that that is particularly true for schools, because these are institutions that persist through generations of students that journey through, each of them having their own particular experience of the place and contributing their own particular piece to the culture of the institution as it lives and grows. So I want to talk with you this afternoon about steps on the journey that I have been on as GLSEN's leader, where I started for 13 years, and give you a sense, started 13 years ago, and give you a sense of some of the steps that it has taken to get us from where we were when GLSEN was founded in 1990 to a place today where I can ask you all about gay straight alliances and the Day of Silence and GLSEN lesson plans used in your schools, and have so many raise their hands. I'm not sure that I can convey to you how humbling and meaningful that is to me, given what the world was like when I began this journey and when GLSEN started this work. So let me try to take you back for just a moment. My journey in these issues actually began, of course, for me, myself, as a lesbian growing up. And in high school, when I was able to take the step of running away from home to go to boarding school, that's how I thought of it, where I could be closeted in peace and not need to be around my parents and worry about what they might think. I was a good student, and I went to a school where I felt I would find intellectual community. I was very eager. I showed up, and my first year there, I was this eager young student going into my classes and actually thinking that it was a good idea to get in there and talk and learn and be part of the discussion. And I made the mistake early on in my freshman year of busting the curve in my English class. Unfortunately, the teacher let everyone know it. I don't know why you all couldn't have read the book the way Eliza did, which was The Kiss of Death. So the next day, I came back to this classroom. It was one of my favorite classes. I came back to the classroom, and I'll never forget this, walking into a corner classroom at my high school with very large windows on 2 sides. And as I walked in, I realized, wait, it's class time, and there's nobody in this room yet. It's only 2 minutes before the class was supposed to start. And then I looked over, and I looked at the window shade, and I saw a little paper doll hanging by its neck from the pull on the window shade. And I walked over and I took it down, and on the paper doll, someone had written, "Eliza is a dyke." And this was my reward for being too interested in participating in class. Now, I was not out to anybody. This was 1982, but I wasn't out to anybody at the time. But my classmates who wanted to punish me for doing too well in class chose that epithet as the way to make sure that I never spoke up again. And when I took that doll down and saw that inscription, I didn't think, how dare someone do this to me? I didn't think, I'm going to make sure that we find out who did this. I thought, how did they know? And I put it in my pocket, and I never mentioned it to anyone until about 15 years later. And I did not speak again in that class until almost the end of the year. They achieved their aim. But over that time, as I considered that experience, I did come to a point in my high school years where I realized that I had asked the wrong question. Not how did they know, but how could they do that? And what does it mean to be part of a community where a group of students would conspire together to behave that way? And I thought, over time, I would do something about it. My journey took me through a number of different jobs and careers, and I ended up at GLSEN. As you heard, I was a filmmaker for a while, but I ended up at GLSEN in the year 2000, inspired by my mother, who was a high school English teacher and an early GLSEN volunteer. When I had come out to my parents, after running away and going through a lot, I found out that they were willing to stand with me, and she actually was part of founding GLSEN's first New York City chapter, a great blessing for me. When I joined GLSEN in the year 2000, there are a couple of things to remember about the work that we were engaged in. Homosexuality was still illegal in this country. States could outlaw homosexuality itself until Lawrence versus Texas in 2003. Homosexuality has only been definitively legal in the United States for about 10 years. We were at a point at that time where gay-straight alliances were beginning to appear in schools across the country. GLSEN is today in touch with 4,500 such clubs in all corners of the country and in Puerto Rico. But at that point, people were arguing that if a school had a gay-straight alliance, it ought to make ex-gay therapy or reparative therapy available to students to provide a balanced view on homosexuality. And we were in the midst of fighting efforts to pass additional laws in this country that would prohibit positive discussions of homosexuality in public schools around the nation. It was clear at that time for all of us at GLSEN that we had a lot of work to do to illustrate to allies, great and small, at all ends of the spectrum, that the abuse and violence that LGBT students were suffering was an issue around which we had to find common ground. Our research told us things like, at that time, 9 out of 10 lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students were experiencing physical, verbal, or sexual, harassment at school. And because of that, they were suffering poor grades, they were less likely to plan to graduate and go on to college, and their individual sense of self, well-being, and even sometimes their will to live would suffer. We began to reach out in an environment where there was conservative dominance in many state houses, a different time than we have today, but a place where we could still find a willing ear at all ends of the spectrum. And the next stop I want to illustrate for you on this journey was in 2003, when I sat in a boardroom in Alexandria, Virginia, with representatives of the Heritage Foundation, the American Enterprise Institute, and the Christian Educators Association International, a Christian alternative to the National Education Association as a teachers' union. We had come together at the behest of the Freedom Forum. Their Constitution Center was interested in finding out, in the midst of what were then commonly known as the culture wars, whether there wasn't some way that we could carve out common ground that would allow us to make progress rather than yelling at each other. They had brought us together to discuss what might be some common principles that would allow us to go to defuse the battles then raging in our public schools in the service of reducing the violence and stress that all students were facing, feeling that their classrooms were ideological battlegrounds. We were very eager to be part of this conversation. And what we came to around that table was the idea of a constitutional idea of 3 R's, that within a constitutional system, all participants needed to recognize that there were rights, responsibilities, and respect due to others. That no matter what our beliefs, we could agree on a set of behaviors that we felt were commonly acceptable for all people in schools, and that if we wished the rights of our children and our families to be respected, we'd had to afford the same respect to others. Out of that came a statement of common ground issued by the Freedom Forum and signed on to by all of our organizations. And about a year later, I sat next to the head of the Christian Educators Association at a meeting of the National School Boards Association to begin dialogue about what could be achieved under this common ground principle. It was a first step and an interesting moment to experience the sort of calming power of having a very legalese, technical discussion of these issues. The constitutional principles, which sometimes feel so dry, were actually a wonderfully simple way to get back to a conversation rather than a fight. It was an interesting moment. As time went on, we built on these and actually got the Christian Educators Association's partnership lobbying Congress for common sense bullying prevention legislation that has been gaining ground ever since. And over time, as people began to recognize that the issue of behavior and not belief provided a very important place for people to come together from very different viewpoints, we began to see significant progress in defusing the kinds of angry confrontations that were happening in schools across the country. And then as that began to take root, sort of in Virginia in the north and California, the northwest, we began then some outreach into different parts of the country. And in 2009, I found myself in a place, a little town called Decatur, Alabama, near Huntsville, a place that was an important next stop on this journey. When I went to Decatur, I was accompanying a member of GLSEN's board of directors, a woman named Serdina Walker of Springfield, Massachusetts. Serdina had 4 children and had just lost her son, Carl Joseph Walker Hoover, to bullying and suicide. Carl was 11 years old, and we do not know what Carl's identity was, who he would have grown up to be. But what Serdina did start talking about right away was that one of the pressures facing her son that drove him to his despair was the fact that he was being called faggot and gay at school on a daily basis by many other students who didn't like the fact that he was dedicated to his studies and was doing well in his new school. You can imagine how that spoke to me. Serdina and I were in Decatur, Alabama, accompanied by her sister Barbara, for moral support, to address a county-wide public school bullying prevention conference. When we got to Decatur, we found that the conference was being held in a very, very large Baptist church. And when we got there and entered the church, there were about 1,300 people in the sanctuary for the conversation and for her presentation. Serdina and her sister were the only black people in the room. And I, as far as I could tell, was the only woman with very short hair who was clearly a lesbian. So we walked into the room, and we stood at the back waiting for Serdina to be introduced, looking at the sanctuary and the drum set that was still set up from the service and an enormous crucifix. Now, Serdina herself is a very religious woman. She is a member of a Pentecostal congregation in Springfield, Massachusetts. But we stood in the back together as the head of the county's school safety office introduced a representative of the federal government's Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools. And this federal government representative got up in front of the audience and said, It's wonderful for me to be back home in Alabama, where a civic conference like this can be held in a megachurch like this one, and no one freaks out about it. At which point, Sir Diener turned to me and said, "I am freaking out about this." And I said, "Me too." And the speaker went on and gave a very polished presentation about the scope of the problem that we were facing nationally. And Sir Diener began getting more and more nervous as she thought about the presentation she was about to make, complete with charts and graphs and stories about GLSEN. This was a bullying conference where no one had yet said the word lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, but where she was about to broach a topic which was causing her at that point a great deal of agita. Sir Diener got up after that speaker and went to the front. And I will never forget her courage on a couple of fronts that day. As a mother, speaking simply from the heart, she stood up and said, "I hope you will forgive me. I am not a polished speaker, but I have an important thing to tell you, and I hope you will open your hearts to my son's story. And I hope that you will also recognize that I am, in fact, freaking out being in this environment." It was a tremendously brave thing to say. She told her story, and the large audience, some of them were with her and some were not, but afterwards, it was amazing to see the line of people waiting to come up and speak with her, to talk about the experiences that they had had as parents, the epithets that their children had repeated to them, and the ways that they thought that they actually might be in a position to help fight this issue. That was the first time that Sir Diener suggested to me the difference between having a principle for which you can stand and a cause for which you would fight. Among the people waiting to talk to her that day was a man who was the head of the Retired Judges Association of Alabama. And he got information from Sir Diener about GLSEN and about the legislation for which we were fighting, something called the Safe Schools Improvement Act. And later that month, we did an action to get people from around the country to write to members of Congress or make a phone call or send a letter. Making a phone call at that point was still something people did through these actions. It happens more or less. But what was amazing to me that when we launched that action is that the most phone calls generated to Congress came from Alabama, because this gentleman had activated the Retired Justices Network to support the Safe Schools Improvement Act in the name of respect for all, because of the story told to him by an African-American mother from Springfield, Massachusetts, whose son had been tormented as a faggot at the age of 11. She was able to reach people and convince them to fight. The next stop for me in thinking about how we promote this culture of respect and bring people along with us on this journey came in 2010. The moment when I actually sent my oldest daughter off to kindergarten. I became a parent in 2005. Now I'm a mom twice over, and my oldest daughter's in 3rd grade. But I will never, ever, ever, ever forget the first time that I left my daughter at the schoolhouse door. If there are any other parents in the room, yeah, a few other people nodding. Something happened to me as an advocate when I found my grounding as a parent. Not only did I tap into that unbelievable mama bear energy that, okay, anyone who's heard those stories about lifting a car, right? It's a real thing. But it also brought home for me all of the ways that in fighting for this cause, I could speak from my heart as a parent. That's a little bit different than speaking from your heart as the person who's experienced this issue yourself. On the first day of kindergarten, actually the day before Clara's first day of kindergarten, I found myself on MSNBC debating a woman named Candy Cushman, who is the education expert for Focus on the Family, talking about the work that GLSEN was doing on yet another frontier. We had gone from reaching out to the Christian right and political conservatives, to expanding our work into the South and reaching out to find common ground around bullying. And we then began looking at the ways that our work in grades K through 5 needed to expand at the elementary school level. In talking with Candy Cushman that day, she said, all of this is very well and good. We understand that no one should suffer. But what does any of this have to do with elementary school? And in that moment, how can you introduce these topics to young children? And I said, Candy, I want you to know my daughter is actually heading off to elementary school for the first time tomorrow. She'll be starting kindergarten. And her homework assignment for the very first day of school is to bring a photograph of her family. And I have to know, I have to ask, and I need to know what's going to happen when they go around the circle and every child in that class talks about the photo of their family. How will my daughter's teacher react? How will my daughter's teacher handle it if some other student reacts poorly to that picture? How can anyone say that my daughter isn't to be afforded the same respect as any other child in that circle? My next kick in the pants as a parent came just 2 weeks later, after Clara had been in elementary school for 2 weeks. She came home one day, and she got angry at me for saying no about something, as children will. And when I didn't change my mind, she railed back and said, really wound up at me and said, Mama, you are a sissy. At which point I thought, okay, she's been in kindergarten for 2 weeks, and she's already learned that that's what you use. Not only does she have absolutely no idea what that word means, but that's what she's learned in 2 weeks of kindergarten. In fact, the kind of language that she was learning from her peers at that point was strongly corroborated. We did a study of elementary school students and teachers not long thereafter, looking at language use and teachers' perceptions of what was going on. And we found that by the middle of third grade, the large majority of these students had heard or used the word fag. And this is in elementary school. It's something that teachers clearly need to be prepared to deal with. Now, all of this and how early this plays out really brings up something that I think is really tremendously important for all of us in thinking about bullying, issues of gender and sexual orientation and respect, and how these issues need to be addressed among young people. And this, for me, is a powerful underpinning of how we reach out to potential allies across the political spectrum in dealing with this. Because the fact is, children are testing these things out at a young age. And what it underscores for me is the fact bullying is not a hate crime. Bullying is not a criminal offense. It is a dynamic among children that challenges adults to redraw lines of community and what is and is not acceptable in debate and discussion. There was, in fact, a Dutch study of behavior among children that really illuminated this quite nicely. And I have to say that there was a period of time when Glisson's position about this, our understanding of bullying as something that required a teachable response, actually got us into a lot of trouble with some of our allies in the bullying prevention and LGBT movements. Here's what they found in the Netherlands. They did a study of children in the elementary grades, and what they found was that bullies are not at all motivated by a particular animus towards another person. They don't choose targets based on disliking Billy or Susie. They're very good at figuring out who in the community is not going to be defended by their peers or by authorities. And what's so important to me about this is that it really highlights everyone's responsibility for the issue. Because what a bully is doing is reflecting back to the community the signals that are being sent by everybody else about every member of that community. The ability of a bully to choose a target is our collective responsibility. And the problem with bias-based bullying, the problem when those words come out, whether it's about ability or sexual orientation or gender, is that it complicates the way adults respond to behavior among children. Because anyone who's a parent knows silence speaks volumes. Hesitation is immediately diagnosed. Anyone who's ever tried to negotiate with a child about anything knows how quickly they know when they've got you on the ropes, right? But when an adult hesitates because they do not feel comfortable with the issue at hand, when they don't know how to talk about what's going on, they can reinforce the very behavior that they wish to address. But behind all of that is that the child who chooses to call someone else a fag because they know that they will get some power out of it and they won't face punishment is not acting out necessarily their own beliefs. They are acting out on something that has been taught to them, and the response needs to be commensurate. An opportunity for a child that young to learn and to be reintegrated into the community. Now, the Sissy story does have a good ending. Eva and I had done a lot of homework about finding the right place for our daughter to attend kindergarten. She was in a New York City public school when we visited there, I saw Glissan's No Name Calling Week materials up in the hallway, so I thought we had a good chance it would be a good place. We'd done a lot of homework. About 2 months after Clara called me a sissy, I was with Clara and, I admit, taking a work phone call because I was relaying this story to someone about Clara calling me a sissy. So I said, and then she reared back and said, "Mama, you are a sissy." And Clara overheard me. She said, "Mama, don't say that word. That's a bad word. You might hurt someone's feelings." So everything has a way of getting worked out. In all of this, there really are 3 steps, I think, that have marked each phase of this journey for Glissan and for me in finding the common cause and the common ground to build a culture of respect. The first one, as in reaching out to someone like the Heritage Foundation or the Christian Educators Association and engaging in real dialogue with them, involves overcoming your own fear of how someone will respond. Another phase of it is really building the case, gathering the information about the nature of the problem you wish to solve and why you think it is one that everyone needs to work on together, and then making your case. But ultimately, the thing that can move you from having a political alliance that's based on a very calculated political decision to having a real sense of movement, collective movement, which requires personal commitment, is being able to speak from the heart about what these issues mean and mean to you and could mean for all of us collectively. All of which leads me back to the scariest 2 minutes of my entire life. In early August, I received a letter from the Reverend Bernice King, the CEO of the King Center. And at first, I have to admit, when I got this letter, I didn't believe it was real. The letter read, "I would like to extend an invitation to you to speak during the 50th anniversary Let Freedom Ring commemoration and call to action on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. As Executive Director of Glissan, I would invite you to reflect on the event's themes of the freedom to prosper in life, freedom to peacefully coexist, and freedom to participate in government." I actually thought that this was like one of those things that you get that says, you are invited to the inauguration of the President of the United States. You can come stand on the lawn with 50,000 other people. But 2 days after I got that letter, I got a call from Dr. King's office. And she let me know that our partner organizations in the South, with whom we'd been working for some time, had nominated Glissan to be part of the celebration. Knowing that, and learning later as I did that Presidents Carter, Clinton, and Obama would be closing the day on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, I realized, one, this was real. Two, I was going to have to figure out a pretty darn good speech. And three, I owed it to our partners to make sure that they were well represented on that day. All of that combined to create a pretty daunting situation. So on the day, they took us all into the Lincoln Memorial, there's a little elevator, you might not know, there's a little elevator that will take you inside, up to where the actual statue of Lincoln sits. And I came up into the elevator and came out into the wings of the Lincoln Memorial and immediately met the Reverend Leah Daughtry, who was the executive producer of the day's events. They had been very strict with us. Originally, we had been allotted 3 minutes. It then was cut to 2 as the roster of speakers grew. And I went up to the Reverend Daughtry both to congratulate her on the day and to reassure her that I actually had 1 page, 2 minutes. And she took a glance at it and she said, "I'm a preacher. That's 2 minutes. I thank you for doing your homework." But she also said something that meant the world to me. I said, "Hey, I know you're having a hard day. You're trying to get through all these people to get to 3 o'clock. I promise I won't go over my allotted time." And she said, "I want you to know something. I personally am so glad that GLSEN is here. I know you've heard what people have been saying. Ever since that GLSEN was announced as a speaker at the anniversary march, we had been receiving hateful messages about the fact that we would be there. One of our primary adversaries wrote that GLSEN is pure evil and has no place at that celebration. Another said, homosexuality has absolutely nothing to do with civil rights." But when I got up into the Lincoln Memorial and spoke to the Reverend Daughtry, she turned to me and she said, "I have 2 nephews who have been struggling with this. They're young, and they haven't yet found their way. But it means a lot to me that they will know that GLSEN is on this stage and has been welcome as part of this celebration." So with that, I looked up and immediately saw Jimmy Carter and Carolyn Kennedy standing over in the other corner, and tried to center myself once again. They took me over to the other wing. They had me walk down the steps into that chute I told you about, where in front of me there were 2 speakers and a haka troupe from New Zealand who were going to go before me, and the aforementioned band that was going to play you off if you went over your 2 minutes. One by one, we were sent off onto the steps to say our piece and to address that crowd. And finally, I had my turn to walk out to the center, to look out, to notice the countdown clock on the teleprompter, and to begin. And that's when I had an experience that made me feel that I had forever passed that first step of overcoming fear and learning to make your case and speak from the heart. Because as I began this speech, I simply started by saying, 50 years ago, Byard Rustin stood on this stage, leading the vast crowd, reciting the demands of the March on Washington. A movement spoke through him, but the world would not embrace him because he was gay. Today, LGBT voices are welcome to this stage, and President Obama has awarded Byard Rustin the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And at that moment, the entire crowd rose up with the most amazing cheer for a man who had never been welcomed by his own community for who he was, but who was honored today as a pioneer in this ongoing journey to respect. After a day like that, as I walked home through the crowd, I promised that I would take that first step at every opportunity, in his memory and in the memory of students like Carl, who needed to know that today we are welcome everywhere, we find common cause, and we find people who will fight with us for the culture of respect that will sustain us all. Thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in any ways you wish.
I believe our guest has agreed to receive some questions and answers, and if you want to stand and
Thank you.
offer a good comment or question. And I know this is not a bashful crowd.
I was in a class earlier. People were right there with their questions. I love it. Please.
Could you introduce yourself and then fire away with your question, please, sir?
John Hickey. Is this on? I'm with PFLAG DuPage. I want to thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you, PFLAG.
Education is so important. And I find so often teachers, administrators, people of authority working with children don't know how to respond. I don't know that they're properly prepared. I don't know that they have the right tools in their toolkit. Can you talk into what might be going on or what might be the solution to help train and give people the tools that they need?
Sure. First of all, many thanks. PFLAG is a wonderful partner to GLSEN and has been a real collaborator over many, many years, particularly at the chapter level. But yes, I think there is a great deal of trepidation sometimes, particularly in communities where these issues feel new. There are a couple of different ways that we, and in partnership with PFLAG and others, are trying to get at that issue. Couple of things. One is GLSEN is in year 3 of a 3-year campaign to place a GLSEN Safe Space Kit in every single middle and high school in the entire country. The Safe Space Kit has a sticker to signal when a teacher or administrator wants to let people know that there is a safe space for students. And the kit itself contains information and resources for the individual to prepare themselves for the moment when a student comes to them, and also to be ready to reach out to colleagues to try to build a network of support within a school so they're not alone. That, of course, is a sort of calling card intervention, I think, that we're getting out around the country. We've also developed and tested modules of professional development that we are trying to embed in school district practice. This was actually a project funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Division of Adolescent and School Health, where they helped us develop professional development modules that we actually train districts to deliver to their staff. And these programs are being piloted now in places. It's in Baltimore, D.C., Philadelphia, and Los Angeles. And we're beginning to do a sort of second tier of cities where that we would do this work as well. The other thing that's beginning to happen is a recognition among teacher prep and in-service training programs that this is an issue that teachers need to have as part of their toolkit. Excuse me. And there are a number of different ways that either schools of education or in-service training programs are integrating into ideas about classroom management, bullying prevention. Our job as GLSEN and our strategy is to ensure that every single high-impact education reform effort designed to improve our schools includes LGBT issues and GLSEN programming where appropriate, so that, excuse me, pre-service certification standards or in-service training standards or district-level professional development offerings or Teach for America training institutes all include information on the particular risks that students face from anti-LGBT bullying and bias, and specific ways to get at it. And the key, as always, is practice. It's always about the first person who's willing to do it, and the people who are willing to stand by them. Nobody's perfect. No one's going to get it right, but someone has to take that first step. So.
This is from one of our fabulous first-year students from Long Island. Introduce yourself.
Yes, hello. My name is Callum Williams. I'm a first-year student here. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was if there, I don't believe I heard you say it before, but I believe I heard you say that when your mother found out, I believe that you came out, she supported you, I believe. And I wanted to know what was sort of your motivation or inspiration that helped you or led to you coming out as a person.
Thank you. That's an interesting question. I think, it's interesting. I was in a first-year ethics class earlier, and I understand, what was it called? Truth, Lies, and Everything in Between. And one of the observations that you made there was about the feeling of lying that comes from not being able to be yourself. What does it feel like to grow up with an aspect of who you are hidden from other people? And maybe you go to certain lengths to hide it. I have since learned that every boyfriend I had in high school was gay, because we without talking to each other, we all figured it out, and we figured out what to do. But in essence, it doesn't feel good to lie to people on a basic level. I think that's a basic human experience, and I'm blessed in that I wanted to have and had a sense that I could have a more authentic relationship with my parents. And I think also my mother was very busy, leaving books around to let me know it was going to be okay. So I think a combination of her openness to it, her letting me know, and my desire to be myself and not waste energy in hiding were the two things. Thanks.
Other questions?
Behind you.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Bradley Levi. I'm a junior, and my question is, since LGBTs have been accepted into the community, how have the rates of bullying differed?
Good question. So every 2 years, GLSEN does a national school climate survey of the school experiences of LGBT students all across the country, and we've been doing it since 1999. And one of the most exciting things for me in 2011 was that we actually began to be able to discern a pattern of decline in rates of victimization of LGBT students. The short answer is that where schools act, things get better. There are 4 basic interventions that can make a tremendous difference. Having an LGBT inclusive bullying prevention policy in place, having trained and supportive staff ready and willing to help students, having an inclusive curriculum that provides that all-important both window on the world and mirror on your own experience for every child at the school, and opportunities for student leadership, like the presence of a GSA. You can actually find very powerful correlations between the presence of a GSA and better outcomes for students in a school. So we've seen a slight decline. We're getting down towards, I used to talk about 9 out of 10 students. Now I talk about just over 4 out of 5. So from 90 to 80%, I think, is a nice measure. One other thing is GLSEN has had an ad council PSA campaign in the field since 2008, trying to get 13 to 16-year-olds to stop the unthinking use of anti-LGBT language like "that's so gay." And we have seen a very distinct decline in the use of that phrase, as well as the words faggot and dyke. Excuse me, I have to say these horrible words all the time. Among 13 to 16-year-olds who have seen these PSAs. So we've really started to get, it's nowhere near where we need to be, and it's much more pronounced in places where schools have acted to build that sense of community.
Couple other questions? Professor, anything from your side? I'll call you out.
My name is Bonnie Beach. I'm a retired teacher from, Nutcher High School, which is kind of up the road up here.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, this is not a question, but I just would like to make this statement in support of what you're saying, and also to the gentleman who is sitting in front of me who asked a question about support in schools. In 1994, GLSEN had a campaign called Back to School, where they invited GLBTQ students to write back to their high schools and colleges and say what kind of an experience they had had. And we were the fortunate recipients in our school of 4 such letters.
Wow.
They came into the administration And our superintendent at that time, who was so horrified that any student who had gone through our school did not feel welcome, affirmed, and respected, he called me immediately, and I was out at that time. My partner and I were, and he said, I want you to put together a committee. We're going to sit and talk about this. We are going to start with the staff, and this is going to support students. And we had a safe school movement, and it was very, very strong. I hope that it's still going. But one of the two things that we found right away was, especially on the part of male teachers, we want to make our classroom safe. We want our students to feel respected. But when a student says, why are you doing this? Are you gay? I don't know how to respond. We just assume teachers know how to respond to things, and they don't always. So what you're doing now in GLSEN is a hugely important facet of education for teachers, and actually helping them to think about the words and get the words. And the second thing that happened, and this was a huge learning for us, and it was very shocking, as we began to present to staff meetings and at institute days, we suggested that teachers write safe and respect student additions to their course outline. And several teachers, many teachers, put up their own stickers that said, this is a safe space. And what happened to my partner the very first day that this went up, one of the teachers came running into her office and said, oh my God, I put up this safe space sticker in my classroom. And a student went up to me and said, I guess I can come out to you because this is a safe space. And he said, holy cow, I had no idea what to say. So on behalf of two very much elder members of the community who have worked with GLSEN for a long, long time, I want to thank you. And I want to say to those of you who are very young, you are doing great work, keep it up. And to those of you of intermediate age, as you are, just
Excellent.
thank you for everything.
I thank you very, very much. And
Whatever
thank you.
age we are, thank you.
That's right. But I just wanted to say how much it means to hear about that campaign. And part of what we did with the Safe Space Kits was encourage people to send one to their school with a personalized letter. And so many times, here's the thing. My mom was a teacher. I really believe teachers are there because they care about young people. And sometimes it's just about having the chance to try it once. Like, oh my gosh, what do I say? So a lot of times when we do more actual workshop work with people, there's a chance to just say it over and over and get it wrong plenty of times and just get to reflect it back, because if you've never had to say it out loud, you don't know how it's going to come out. But mostly, thank you so much. It's wonderful to know that about that.
So we have time for one more question.
Oh, we sure do.
Last, because maybe we can get one more in if you're okay. But
I'm fine.
Hi, I'm Austin McGrath, and my question kind of comes with a backstory, so my apologies. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from Campbellsport, Wisconsin, and most of you are not going to know where that is. It's a town of under 2,000 people, and so I was the only out homosexual my entire life in that entire town. And so I started attending GSA conferences with my guidance counselor and a couple other students who were supportive. And so over the course of that first year, it had come to us that we wanted to pioneer GSA. And so in this pioneering and this fight that we had, we eventually won. And we started a GSA. And so I guess my question to you is what advice I can give to them, now that I'm no longer with them, on how to continue to go strong in a community that is so not exactly open and accepting of the community.
Well, first and foremost, let me just say that all the steps I was talking about for GLSEN and for me have been made possible by and inspired by the incredible fact that people, teachers and students, are standing up every day to do things like that. And I always feel that our job at GLSEN is when someone's brave enough to stand up, to make sure that we support them in doing what they're going to do and do everything we can to make sure that that bravery won't go to waste and will be successful in creating a change. So first and foremost, thank you for doing that. We have... So there are a number of resources on our website about starting and sustaining a GSA. And there's also some information about sort of taking care of yourself when you're a pioneering advocate. Just to remind, there's actually a checklist about, taking care of yourself as an organizer, just in the sense of give yourself credit for how difficult it is to do this stuff. And then on a sort of more practical level, there are a lot of ways that finding some common cause, whatever that common cause might be, with other clubs, with other student groups within the school, is really important. To have allies. This week is actually an event for GLSEN called Ally Week in high schools across the country. But knowing that, you have partners in this work, whoever they might be, is hugely important so that you don't end up feeling completely isolated. I can't say enough about the wonderful people who are advisors to Gay Straight Alliances, and finding and supporting great GSA advisors is hugely important. They're the key, I think, to continuity, certainly, as students move through their school experience. So I would say finding allies, solidifying and supporting the relationship with a very good advisor, and taking care of yourself. And go to glsen.org, glsen.org.
And one more final question, Doctor.
Hi, Eliza. I'm Chrissy.
Hi.
I'm a freshman. I'm on the exec board of Equal, and I'm also a journalist with our local newspaper, with our college
Good for
newspaper.
you.
And I don't know if you remember me, but I was at Camp GLSEN 2011. I'm from San Diego, so I was our Jumpstart coordinator.
That's right.
So,
Hi.
so it's really cool to see you here. And I was just wondering, because coming from San Diego, somewhere with a really strong base, and being so trained in all the stuff and having all the GLSEN stuff, and coming here, I was wondering if you have advice on how I individually and us as a group can better foster that kind of environment here in the Midwest, especially with local high schools and everything. Because we do stuff we do the big gay gathering, and we have the high schools come and we support them in that way. But I was wondering if you have any advice of how we can further build on that, because I know that it changed my life having GLSEN, having that activist community. So if you just
Sure. Well, very good to see you.
You too.
You know what? This is such a basic, this sort of organizing 101 for anyone who's been an organizer. People would rather come to an action than to a meeting, right? So I think that finding sort of activities to do together, frankly, I think are good things. One of the things that came up in our conversation at lunchtime was about people weren't aware of the challenges faced by LGBT elders. There's a wonderful organization called SAGE, and I have been recruited to try to help get the executive director of SAGE to be a speaker here at some point soon. But something like taking groups together to go and visit with, say, a SAGE group. I mean, something like that, where a sort of community service activity, or even community service that's not LGBT specific. There may be other issues on campus or things going on in the community where, as a group, you can make a contribution and enjoy each other's company and be part of something larger. But I always come back to that principle. It's don't invite people to meetings, invite them to come do something, right? So, sure.
Will you all join me in thanking our guest today,
Well,
who's been here, and joy to have her with us.
Okay, absolutely.
And
Thank you all.
And our own professor, Dr. Mulvaney, has a few closing words.
Very few, I promise. I just wanted to thank you for being with us. Thank you for the wonderful work you've been doing for so many years, for so many people. And thank you again, Reverend Johnson, for your contributions here to Elmhurst and to so many across the world. And thank you, students, and those of you that shared bits and pieces of your own stories. It certainly is so important for all of us to concentrate on what it means to have a culture of respect for everyone here at Elmhurst and throughout the world. So thank you so much. This is a small token for us to remember us by.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you.